Hey, what's up guys, Jonas here, and in this video I want to show you 5 pro tricks for working with effects in MA2. And I started out this video thinking that this video is just about some random effects tips, when the reality of it is that I think you should actually start creating your own template effects library that you bring to every show, because I think it's more important than ever for you as a personality, as an artist, to actually have your own looks and be able to bring that to your show. So make sure to stick around for tip number 5. That's actually my favorite. And without any further ado, let's jump into trick number 1, slot loading your template effects. Now, I'm a huge believer in template effects. I feel like they allow me to bring my own personal style to every show. And so I think one really cool trick is being able to quickly assign one of your effects to an executor playback. Now the problem is though, what do you do with a template effect? How do you get it quickly onto an executor, maybe even during a show? Well, there's a really neat trick that I found out, and let me show you right now. So in our show file today, we have some mega pointies. Seriously, set up in a way like a nice little matrix grid that you would probably never find in a real show. But I personally happen to just like this arrangement. So my video, my rules, so fuck it. That's how I'm hanging my fixtures in my own MA3D. And I also brought some 3 template effects, one with just a nice little dimmer, then a dim tilt flyout, and finally some RGB chase stuff going on. And by the little indicators down here, you can see this first one only has a dimmer, the second one has dimmer and position, and the third has dimmer and color. As you can also see up here, this is your legend. 1 is dimmer, then 1 and 2 dimmer and position, and so on. You get the idea. Also, for anyone who's not so sure about the terminology, a template effect means that you don't have any fixtures assigned to it. So that's why you can greatly reuse them. That's my little dog in the background. Oh, what a cutie. So essentially template effects only work like when I double click on them, nothing seems to happen. That's because I need to make a selection of fixtures, and then I can pretty flexibly use whatever template effect I want. So how did we get those onto an executor fast? Now, usually what you could do is create a copy and then go into this thing and then take a selection. If you have a selection, that is. So go in here, take selection, I don't know, copy the next one, or copy effect 1 through at range. I mean, you get the idea. So this is something I've seen operators do before, and I think this is really tedious. So a better way to go about this is actually to have, let's say, 1 to maybe 6 different slots that you can pretty flexibly switch around, like however many you need. I'm just going to show you with 1 slot. So the idea is that we go group, and then we take an effect. And now comes the cool part. If we go store, and I'm using my keyboard shortcuts here, and store that on an empty effect slot, then you can already see that because I did take a selection, now this effect is a selective effect. You can then take this sucker and actually assign that to an executor. And now we will see that our beautiful dimmer effect is running. Now, what do we do when we want to swap this out? Actually, I'm going to delete this one again, because the trick is, let's say you're already in a show, you have your template effects and you really want to use them. Well, here's the cool trick. Just long press B or this button up here, and you will enter the blind programmer. This is a separate programmer. Anything that happens in here has nothing to do with your main programmer, and nothing that you do in here goes out to your fixtures. So everything that you do now is completely invisible to your audience. So now we're essentially going to do the same thing. Group, take one of our template effects, store it in an empty effect slot. Let's just call this slot 1, then just assign it. Now this was not active. Good. Now we're just going to long press B again to exit the blind programmer, and we have our dimmer effect. Now the cool thing is that if you want to swap that effect out for something else, just long press B again, hit your group. Let's do with the RGB chase, store that in this slot, go overwrite, and now exit the blind programmer again, and you see magically another effect appearing in here. Now you could of course also store all of your effects inside of a long sequence. That also works for getting it onto an executor. The problem with that though is that number one, you have to do a lot of preparation, like you have to store all of your effects. Essentially, it's the same situation as before, where you manually copy a ton of stuff, and you don't want to do that just because it takes so much time. And also the second thing is, if we go into our blind programmer again, we go group, and let's say we want to use this position effect over here, go overwrite, exit blind programmer again. If you were to assign this effect into a sequence, then this master fader of the executor only controls the dimmer. So in that case, your dimmer values, yes, they would go up and down, but the positions would just go full circle. So instead, if you assign an effect directly to an executor, like we do here, then you can already tell this master effect is actually essentially limiting the size of your position effect. Now, when we want to be really fancy, what we can do as well, and now we're getting into something a little technical as part of the first trick, let's say. So we can see here that the tilt is relative. So this means that if we turn this baby off over here, we actually open up our position presets like so. Let's give these a nice tilt of something like that. Now if we store this, let's just call this audience. And now when we actually hit this thing and we bring in our effect, since this is a relative effect, this will actually use whatever values are being output to your fixtures right now and then actually oscillate around that. And for that, it's especially interesting if you have the ability to actually limit the range of movement here for your template effects. So that's a great reason to A, not go through this whole work of creating selective effects, but also B, of using this slot loading technique so that you actually maintain the ability to fade in your positions as well. Let's go to trick number 2, and that's pool playback. One cool thing that you might not have known about is the ability to actually use pool playback. And in that case, you can see that nothing is happening, unfortunately. So pool playback, same with, the template thing that we had before. Unless we have a selection, it doesn't work. And also in this case, it doesn't work. So we actually have to create selective effects. Damn it. All right, so let's go copy effect 1 through 3 at 5, please. Okie dokie. Now let's actually switch out of pool playback. Let's go back to normal. All right. Now we actually have to go through the hassle of what I said before. This is something you might want to learn how to do macros for. Anyways, now when we switch back to pool playback, what's really cool is that you can actually directly use these. So let's clear this out. Now you can see that I can toggle between these different effects. And that's, I think, a really cool option of running your show, because now you can actually go in here and just mess around with your playbacks. Now, one problem that I found with this approach, and by the way, keep in mind that you can also open up multiple effect pools here. One problem that I found is that if I have this option enabled, let's say I have all of these things going on, and all of a sudden a breakdown in the track happens, or maybe the rock and roll band that you do lighting for decides to actually end their track. How inconsiderate of them. Now, what do you do then? I mean, you could, in theory, go in here and then close down all of your effects. But maybe what you want to do is just get rid of the color information, or maybe just get rid of the dimmer, something like that. What you can do there, and that's my trick number 2, pool playback with release effects. Now, what we want to do is actually go in here and create an effect just for dimmer. And here comes the special part for form. We're going to use release. All right. We actually have to make this selective so it works for the fixtures that we selected. And we're going to call this release dimmer. Now, let's just copy this actually. Call this release positions, and then copy this one over and call it release color. Now, when we go in here, we can just swap out the attribute type, in this case for position. Doesn't let me do that. All right. We're just going to use tilt now. I need a second one for pan. Thank you very much. Release. And then over here for color. You know what? I'm actually going to delete this and then just go with that option. Actually, let's just take all of the colors. Go to form, edit, release. And now we have 3 release effects. Now let's switch this to pool playback as well. And now something really cool happens. When we go and jam out with our effects over here, we can just toggle these different ones. And now, we're tired of the positions. Let's just go and release them. Bam, there you go. Now you only have dimmer and color left. Now when we release the color, oh my goodness, we don't even have dimmer left. That wasn't supposed to happen. All right, so you might have to play around with this a little bit. The program time, I think, is a bit confusing here now. But essentially now what you have is a release or full control over the different attribute types that you want to get rid of. And like that, you can really be very flexible, I think, with your pool playback, sort of toggling on and off whatever you like. But then when it comes down to it, you can just be like, nope, dimmer's off, position's off, color's off. And you retain full control. And I think that's the most important part of running a good show. Trick number 3, always use the same speedmasters. So this is coming back a little bit to the beginning of this video where I said that I really like my template effects because it allows me to bring my own look to every show that I do. So what I also do, and this I think really important, is that I assign speedmasters. So we can see this over here if we go ahead and fire off this dimmer effect over here, then we can already see that we can greatly improve the wildness of this look by pulling up this speed fader over here. Now to do this is really simple. You want to go over here to speed group and just assign one of these speedmasters to it. And usually what I do is dim, pan, tilt, and then maybe color. And mostly when I, for example, have some shutter effects, what I also do is just put those right on the dimmer. Now with speedmasters, keep in mind that you can actually have this rate. So the rate will actually take the speed that's coming from the speedmaster and then apply this rate to it. And that's the speed at which your effect is going to play back. So now we can see if we, for example, have a fairly low speed of 80 BPM, since we set up the rate to 2, now this effect is going crazy, while this effect over here is still very tame. So like that, you can even bring more variety into your template effect library by actually making sure that every one of your template effects has just the right rate so that the look and feel always is really up to whatever you like it to be. Now the point about always using the same speedmasters is really important. So if we look over here, I have Speedmaster 1, you can see that over here. Speedmaster 1 in this case is always dimmer. Speedmaster 2 is always, I think, pan in my case. I use a pan and tilt in this one. So you can also see that in my template effects, I always have the correct speed group set up. And over here, as I said, whenever mostly like whenever I don't have a dedicated Speedmaster for it because I don't want too many of those floating around, then I will actually just use my dimmer Speedmaster, and that's my main Speedmaster. Now, one thing that's really cool about using always the same Speedmaster with your template effects is if we actually go and open up a new show, and I'm just going to call this effects PSR, then sure, let's save the old show file. Yes, please. Now, when we go into partial show read and we load this show with our template effects, and this could be your base show file, for example. I'm just going to use my fixtures in this case. And we actually have to exit the session in order to be able to do partial show read. Go back to backup and then partial show read. And now all you have to do is go to your effects pool, select your template effect library, and then go add selected items. And you can see here now that we have those effects available. Now what's really cool is if we go in here now and we just pick some random fixtures. I don't know, come on. Yeah, something like that. Now we have a completely different show, and let's say we only have 4 Robin washes, like super tiny show. Now in this case, let's create the session back up with MA3D. I'm just going to pull up my effects over here, and we can already tell that my template effects are present, which is great. Now let's reactivate Mr. MA3D over here. Connection state, perfect. And now what I want to do is go to actually fixture 1 through, and let's just pull this up in MA3D here real quick. I don't want to bore you with that stuff. All right. Front view. Go to setup. Align that motherfucker. And now we have a bunch of fixtures. All right, let's just create a group to make it easier. This is such a lazy man stuff here. God. So now we can play back our regular effects over here, which is great. Now we just brought our own custom looks to a completely new show with completely different fixtures. Now what might surprise you is that if we go into these effects over here, you can actually see that the Speedmaster assignment is kept intact. And that's what I mean with always use the same Speedmasters. If you make it so easy on yourself that you know by heart that you just have to go into an empty effects, into an empty executor. Go to Speedmaster 1, label it dim, and then assign another Speedmaster. And since that's the second one, and you always use the same system, you just have to call this PT or position. Now all of a sudden, you have the ability to control your complete template effects library in this new show. And you just set it up like that. Together with the first trick of slot loading this, you will be up and running in a new setup in no time at all. And I think that's really the beauty of template effects. So make sure to always use the same Speedmaster assignments, learn them by heart, and then you will be able to set up in a new show in just minutes. I think that's really, really cool. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to trick number 5. And that's my absolute favorite. So thank you so much for sticking around. I'm now going to show you how to use custom forms. So one thing I just recently found out about, or let's say recently just fell in love with, is custom effects forms. And you will be surprised by how easy that is. Let's go in here, custom effects. I'm just going to assign this really quick so I can actually show you what that looks like in real time. So now what we're going to do is create a new form. and how to scroll to slot number 25, just because before that you have a whole bunch of built-in forms. I'm just going to call this custom. And now we're going to go into our effect, and we can already see a effect form down here. So this is the one that we just added. I'm just going to use that. Now the default that you start with is this line, but you can already do so much with just that. Since I have the effect assigned, I can actually manipulate the form of this live. And now if you want to be really crazy, you could even edit these things completely live, because take a look at how crazy you can already affect the look and feel of this effect by just going in here and messing around with that single point connecting these two ends. I mean, how crazy is that, right? Completely different. I mean, that's not all though. Once you add more points, it will actually get more interesting. And we haven't even looked at the nonlinear stuff. So just by messing around with this tool a little bit, and don't be scared to like use a lot of points. What I use is, if I have a lot of points, I just decrease the rate. So that will slow down the effects engine going through this waveform. So you can already tell, man, this is so much more interesting than any look you've ever seen from this stock library. And how long did this take us? Come on, this is like half a minute. So do yourselves a fucking favor and use this tool. I mean, this looks so much more interesting. Dude, God, I want to play around with this. Come on. Let's go to custom effects over here. Let's bring in some wings. Oh, dude, this is so trippy. Man, I love it. We can play around with this. See, now we got, let's bring in some position over here. Hello. I mean, look how trippy this is, man. By just using this blocks over here. I mean, the groups, sorry. And now we can give this really nice asynchronous look where it propagates across the fixtures in this uneven way. Oh God. I mean, even if you do a full face zero, give me the complete fixtures kind of thing. I mean, this looks a hell of a lot more interesting than any look that you will get out of the custom system. And now I'm going to blow your mind. Select one of the points and go up here, and you will see that you actually have different options. Yes, you heard that right. So now we can actually soften up this progression. You see how it already got a little, like a lot more softer. Now I'll show you one of my favorite forms, and I hope to not regret this. Man, this is one of my favorites. So I'm actually going to show you one of my favorite forms, and I'm just building this up right now. So you can see sometimes this tool can be a little tricky to use. What you want to do then is just kind of swap through these different options here, and then you will probably find a good option that works for you. So what I'm doing here is essentially, let's erase this one. So what I want to create in this case, yeah, as I said, this can be a bit tricky sometimes, but it's really not that hard once you figure it out. So now what we have here is a super interesting look. And I fell in love with this. This is a look that, in my mind, is incredibly natural. Because what you will see here is a very steep cutoff. Like the lights immediately drop to 20%. And then it has this really nice fade out across the board. So this is, I think, one of the most natural looks that I use on a regular basis, just because if you think about it, lightning, that happens like that. I mean, that's maybe a bad example, but I mean, in general, like nature isn't made up of straight lines, all right? It's mostly actually logarithmic decays or growths. So kind of like that, not that, all right? So by having this kind of curve, what you will see with fixtures is they they blink out really fast. And then they have this nice little afterglow. And it doesn't matter if you have an analog sun strip there, or analog blinders, or a full-on LED type of thing. And you can already tell, like, I could talk about this this tool forever. Like, custom effects forms, I think, is one of the best and easiest way to get your very own personal look into your shows. And I think that's more important than ever in today's world, that you bring your own voice. So please do me a huge favor, make use of these tools to really create your own custom library of template effects. All right, that's it from my side. I know this video was a lot, but I really hope you learned a lot from this. And if you have any feedback for me, please leave them down in the comments. And in general, if you have something nice to say, goddammit, say it. Also in the comments. And then please subscribe and turn on the bell. And those two are my obligations to say as a YouTuber. So I'll see you in the next video.